Hi, I'm Ida Joglar, director of Killy Big.
So, I've got to ask, this is quite an adventure to go up a mountain like this. How did this come about, and how did, in particular, these women decide to do this? I would love to hear just how this came about.
Yeah. So I was at dinner with some friends, and one of them told me about Krista. Krista is the woman who started they call themselves the Curvy Killy Crew. She started this group of women who all climbed Mount Kilimanjaro together, and it was because a couple years before that, she had gone to Kilimanjaro, and she made it, but she didn't have as much fun as she thought she was going to have. She was with a group, and she felt like she was the biggest person in the group. She was the slowest person in the group, and it was just like she just felt uncomfortable in that space. And she had like 300 feet left before to make it to because it has a couple summits, and that started after a while. That started gnawing at her, and she was like, "Man, I want to get to the very top, but it can't be the same kind of experience." So she started asking people, "Hey, if I did it, if we were all women, we were all plus size women, would anybody else come do this with me?" And she had more responses than she ever thought she would get, like more people that then could go on the trip. Because a lot of people can find that the outdoors and like all these adventures are not welcoming to them because they're different bodies, because they have different abilities, because like many reasons, right? I don't know how much to like keep it. So she just wanted to make space for herself, make space for other people who look like her, and in telling the story, right, not just other women, but like, as wide an audience as possible. And that's exactly the kind of story that I want to tell. Like, if I can have a little bit of a positive impact on someone's life, if I can empower somebody to go after what they want to do just by telling the story, then I got to try and do it, right?
For you, traveling with them up the mountain, what was that like as a filmmaker with the gear, the crew? What was that experience like, not on screen, but off screen for you?
It was hard climbing this mountain, but probably not as hard. There is something known as a camera armor, I think is what people call it. And I was so nervous that in trying to get myself up the mountain and the gear, I did have help with the gear. Like I had a local PA, a local mountain guide who worked as my PA, helping me carry stuff up the mountain. And I was just so afraid that I might miss it. I wanted to make sure that I was honoring the story and always like getting like the best shot possible and making sure that I could like tell these women's story, that I could honor it. So that made the climbing easier because I was too engaged and too busy to feel tired, to feel like it was hard to like keep going up. And then of course I had two other women who came and shot with me, and they are incredible. Like they were just like, they were there. A lot of my favorite shots in the film were some of the shots that they got. So
I'm curious, we're here at Bentonville, which honors women filmmaker in particular. What does it mean to have a film that showcases women on screen, but like you just said, a very strong women-led crew? What does that mean to be at a festival like this, but also just to accomplish this knowing that this was a women-led project?
Yeah. Well, I couldn't think of a better place to premiere this film than Bentonville. It just feels like a perfect fit, right? Because it's a film about representation, like more than it is about a mountain. And it never occurred to me to hire, as far as like people who came and like shot with me and who were there, never occurred to me to not hire women. especially because the subject, right, these women are coming together and they're being very vulnerable in this moment. Like if you've ever climbed a mountain, like you know that will strip you down to where you're just all emotion at a certain point. And on top of that, right, they were creating a safe space for themselves in coming together as a community of fat women. And I didn't want to introduce like a masculine like gaze into that, right? So it was important to maintain some of that spirit in who I had with me filming. So that's why I always had women. And there's plenty of talented women out there who, did a great job on this film and are available. Like, go hire some of them,
I'd love to touch upon something you just mentioned, the emotional struggle of the climb itself for these women. You do get to capture the way they come together in particular and keep each other motivated was one of the things I loved about it. Can you talk a bit about the growth of the women? Because it wasn't like this was a group that had known each other for years and done this before. Mm-hmm. A lot of these people had never even met each other. Mm-hmm. There was some real amazing moments of unity in your film.
Yeah, it was 20 women from 20 completely different backgrounds, 20 stories. They had one thing in common, which was that they're plus sized. And that means that they're used to a certain way that people look at them, certain things as that a lot of people who are like outdoors people and climbing people never think about, like, will you fit in your sleeping bag? Like, is there technical gear for when we get to the summit night that will come in my size? And I think in them all coming together, it takes away a lot of that pressure. But I think some of them also did put a little bit of additional pressure on themselves because of that. They're like, oh, I'm doing this not just for myself, but I'm doing this to carry other people up there. I feel like I deviated a little bit from what I was trying to say originally, which was, so all of these women were at completely different points in their own experience as far as when we're talking about fat acceptance and fat positivity. And you had people like Eve, who had been like a fat activist for decades, and you had people like Kathy, who had never had plus size friends and who is an athlete, but had never found that community. And you could see, like for me especially, having followed them through their training up the mountain and afterwards, to see how that changed her perception, not just of herself, but of what she could do. And like now she's leading other women in similar climbs. And it was just amazing to see at all the different points in which people were in their lives. And hopefully that comes across in the film. And, it can allow other people to see their journey, I think, in a new light and hopefully in a positive light.
I feel like the climbing community is kind of a tight-knit group, and people have to watch it from the outside. This film seems like it's opening the door. Can you talk a bit about being able to embrace a community that needs maybe to have more people know that people like these women can do this? People don't have to be a crazy rock climbing person to make it up this amazing, not just this mountain, but other summits, and can do it all around the world. There's so many wonderful summit moments. I'm guessing that's a part of why you wanted to do this project.
Yeah, completely. I think, well, when you're talking about climbing specifically, like you have an idea in your head of what a climber looks like, and you think, well, that's not me. and that kind of thing can be enough to prevent someone from getting out there. But at the same time, just because you can't see it doesn't mean there's not people out there. Like there's people of color out on the trail and like hiking and like doing incredible things. And there's like also, it doesn't have to be like the tallest mountain, like it's whatever adventure you want to go on. And by having this representation, by making it visible, like through this film and just through what these women were doing before I even got involved, just by making this group and like posting about it on Instagram, like that's enough to allow some people, or I would hope, right, that's enough to allow some people to say, I'm gonna go after it, because why not? And yeah, I think this is why representation matters, right?
You brought up Instagram. Mm-hmm. Can you touch upon the importance and maybe the change in the way that social media is helping independent filmmakers, but also just activists and people who want to get a voice out, and how that has helped very much make this film possible?
Yeah. So the group of the Curvy Killy Crew is what these women call themselves. It started on social media. It started because Krista was in these communities, like Fat Girls Hiking and Fat Girls Traveling, and there's communities out there that I've learned so much in the making of this film about how there's this community that's and I think a lot of other communities, right? Like people find themselves, and that's something that social media, we talk a lot about the negative side of social media, but there are still these pockets of just incredible positivity out there, and people being able to find themselves and just sorry,
no, it's
not
wonderful.
being very eloquent, but that's something that I think it made this climb possible for them, and it made this film possible. And I'm hoping that this film also helps you find that for yourself, whatever that means to you.
I'm curious, a lot of filmmakers that do nature documentaries in particular, or nature-led element stories, continue on that trajectory. Like lately we've had filmmakers like Meru, they did another film right after. Has this experience made you want to dive more further into that, or do you want to maybe take a step back? What's your next step on your mountain of filmmaking?
I think for me, even though I often call this film the anti-climbing film, like even though it does take place on a mountain, that's not what it's about. And so I'm not going to stop climbing mountains, because it's something I enjoy. I love, going for hikes, and if there is another opportunity to tell a story like that. But what really attracted me to the story is the human story. And I think a lot of the work I've done in the past often centers women, and those are the kind of stories that I want to tell. It's about women, hopefully, like often women and people in general. I don't want to say it's just women, but people who have been marginalized. And it's important to me to center those people in stories that aren't just about the hardships that come from being marginalized. Like, yes, those stories are very important to tell. Like, as a Latina, like, I want to see Latinx people on screen in stories that aren't just about immigration, and in roles that aren't about like the drug dealer. And it is important to tell those stories, but it's important to diversify the kinds of stories that we're telling, we're centering these people in. Because, and I say these people like me, but I also mean like queer people and different bodied, different abled people. Like, this is, when you only tell one kind of story, it helps perpetuate the idea that we're talking about the other. Right? Like, there's like this monolithic idea of what it means to be, to look a certain way. And that's not the reality, right? There's like way more to people than that. And I think when we start telling more different kinds of stories, then we can get beyond that, and then we can start seeing not just the other, but like, oh, we have a lot more in common. And hopefully one day we won't have to be talking about like why is it hard to get a film out that is about a woman, or that is about a fat person, or that it's about like a person of color. Like hopefully one day the conversation will just be like, what makes the story great,
Wow, I think that's a perfect way to sum up the film. Thank you. Wow. Well, thank you for bringing the film to Bentonville. I do think it's the perfect place to launch this story, and can't wait to see what you have down the pipeline. I do hope you go out in nature, but I love that you are looking to help get a voice out there for people who aren't necessarily having that voice heard. But thank you, and what a wonderful film. Thank you.
Thank you.